All right, good morning. It's October the 7th, 2025. It's 9:30 a.m. and we're going to open up this work study session here this morning. All right, I'll give you a minute to get set up and we'll kick it off.
Thank you, Commissioners. And I don't have a lot prepared for today. We were really getting back together to further discuss those regulation changes that were before you on the 24th of September. So I pulled that slideshow back up for discussion. I think there were three main topics that we were going to delve into a little bit further. 1, 2, and 3 on the screen. The concept brief process, the EDZ overlay, and a time frame for community meetings.
Okay.
So I will.
All right, Commissioner Buck, you got any questions, sir?
Well, just wanted to see where you guys wanted to start with. I'm okay starting with the EDZ zone since that's probably the one that will take the longest. I have the chart in front of me, and what I did was just kind of go out and pick through the easy ones. There's currently 85 listed uses in the EDZ zone. So I went through and just said, hey, we don't need to promote hazardous waste. We don't need to promote, additional storage facilities. Not that they're not allowed, but they shouldn't be encouraged and go outside of the normal procedure where we're not letting the community have the involvement and we're not going through the planning commission. So I picked out 31 of them just straight off the top out of the 85. And I was hoping today we were going to go through that and kind of come to some consensus and make a decision on, okay, hey, this is what we feel comfortable with and this is what we want to move forward with. So that's kind of where I'm at today.
Sure, so we can do that in a general sense. If there are types of uses that the board would like to utilize the EDZ zone to incentivize, we can come back and bring you red lines that only reflect those uses being left in the EDZ. You're right, there are a lot right now. Hazardous waste was one of the ones I highlighted in that discussion because that's always a fun topic.
Yeah, it just became a catch-all for anything not residential. Hey, let's throw it in here.
Right.
But there's some things that we definitely want to encourage. I mean, I would love to see a trade school out here. I think that would be a fantastic idea. The Elizabeth High School recently put the addition on to the school there so that kids could learn a trade. Welding, I think, is in there, and I think they have some other trades in there as well.
Mechanical.
So it would be a nice addition to that. I think that would be something that we'd want to encourage. We don't have an urgent care here in the county. That'd be something we want to encourage. So I think it has a use. I just don't think it should be a catch-all for all uses.
So there's sort of a full spectrum of options, right? As it currently is, it has so many options. I think you noted 85 options allowed in the EDZ zone. The Planning Commission recommendation was the complete opposite, which was eliminating it altogether. And then certainly there's an option in the middle, which is where we tailor the uses to those that the county truly wants to incentivize, and we can bring those changes back to you. So wherever on that spectrum you all would like to go.
All right.
Just to finish real quick, I would encourage to go with your direction that says, don't make a list of what we don't allow. Let's make a list of what we want to incentivize. So you do it proactively rather than reactively.
Can I ask a question just to kind of help us with expectations? So today, I think we're all on the same page. We want to get through this list to the extent we can and get some direction from the board, what staff can bring back to you consistent with your desires of what you want to see. The end product for us is to bring you a resolution that would make final changes at some point in the future at a business meeting. So we're not going to be able to finalize anything today, and at the same time, the degree to which you can give us clear direction is going to be tremendously helpful and getting you to something you can consider for final decision at a future hearing. So is everyone
Yeah,
on
I
the same
agree.
page that that's kind of a reasonable goal for
Yeah.
this? Okay.
Before we go further, are you finished?
Yeah.
All right, Commissioner Schroeder, I want to give you an opportunity, sir.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. No, I agree that, making adjustments is appropriate, much better than just deleting it altogether and tailoring it. You know, we have I think, a perfect example coming before us tomorrow, utilizing the EDZ and its intention. So I think there's definitely place for it. But to dig into each one of these and see if that's where we really want that or not, I agree. Something that we can do. And we'll have questions as we go. If we're going step by step through each one, there'll be questions exactly what kind of businesses we're talking about. But I know they throw out hazardous materials, but does that include businesses that have, as a byproduct of their business, suddenly they have hazardous materials? You know, do we want to, if someone wants to open up a garage and they're going to have used motor oil laying around, suddenly that's classified as a hazardous material. So how do we navigate that if there's a byproduct of their main business creates such things? So there's a lot of details that would have to be talked about as we go through.
Okay, so how do you propose that we move forward with this? Should we take this and,
So I'll offer you one additional food for thought before
Okay.
we decide on next steps, how to go forward. There was a couple of questions in the comp plan survey about economic development and sort of some specific sectors. So those results will be presented at the October 16th open house, right? And then the full survey results will be available. So just throwing that out there as one other factor or additional information if you all wanted to wait and see those to hear a little bit about, the types of economic sectors that the community is most in favor of seeing, and then if you wanted to tailor some of these to that. You certainly don't have to do that, but just one other factor to take into your consideration. So that's one option. Another option, we could pull up the full land use table. I don't know if we actually want to go line by line yet, or if you all wanted to provide some general ideas, about, in general, we want to incentivize, healthcare and retail. I don't know, whatever you decided, we could certainly do that as well. I had one other thing.
well, just,
Oh.
go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, the last thing is, just as a reminder, anything that you change or take out of the EDZ, we're not changing where it is allowed in terms of the zoning, right? So I don't want you to be worried about, we're now not allowing that anywhere. It would simply require the appropriate zoning district rather than being allowed anywhere in the EDZ overlay. So just a little clarification there, just in case that were to be a concern.
So I've had a question. So if we take out hazardous materials, we're not doing away with that. We're just going to make it have to come before the board and do all the steps that it normally would at that point.
Correct, and
We
so
could
that's
have-
a great question. And so to kind of touch on points that both of you made, for hazardous materials on this list, right, that's listed as the land use. So I would argue that, if an operation had hazardous materials as a byproduct, that's not the primary land use, right? That still may be auto repair or wherever that fit in. But if that is the main land use, that is currently requires a special use by review in commercial or industrial. So if you took it out of the EDZ, that would still be the case. It would still require special use by review in either of those zoning districts. But as it currently is, it's allowed anywhere in the EDZ with an approved site plan. So it's really that incentivizing factor.
So here's an example of something that it's in the entertainment and recreation category. And I'm in favor of shooting ranges, indoor or outdoor shooting ranges, because I am a participant, but would you want that to bypass any community input as far as a community meeting and the planning commission? All of a sudden, someone wakes up, they have a, an outdoor shooting range next to them, and there may be a residential or even a business, and they're like, what the heck happened here? Well, it just went to the BOCC and they approved it. So that's concerning, and that's something that may or may not belong there, but it could still be approved there. It just wouldn't be allowed to bypass those processes.
Correct, absolutely. There's also probably an argument to be made about whether it's providing any true economic development to the county, right? Are there, jobs and tax dollars and things like that, which you could argue is why the EDZ is there.
Yeah.
But completely up to you all.
Yeah. So today, do you want, because I'm kind of in favor of the comprehensive plan meeting is only, 10 days away or 9 days away? So I would like to see that feedback from that and get this citizens' feedback. But
I agree.
It'd also be nice to kind of get an idea, maybe today, if we can get something done today, to decide at least what industries we want to, healthcare. Maybe it's school, maybe it's different types of schools, maybe it's, that kind of thing. Maybe it's commercial retail, because that's typically what an EDZ zone is for tax dollars. But, or you can make those recommendations and bring it back too after the community meeting or after the comprehensive meeting.
I think that urgent care should be a priority here because we don't have anything like that in the county. And we all know it's a long trip to get to Castle Rock or get to Parker if there's an emergency. So that's something I don't want to restrict from the county. With Commissioner Buck's comment about, commercial businesses, I think that's important here. And people spend their money in the county and not in Douglas County or Arapahoe County. So we don't want to tie this thing down to the point where it's just, it's has a negative impact on us. As far as hazmat goes and stuff, I also want to make sure that we put something in there because this thing about we're dealing with in the south part of the county. My district is these sludge farms where they're putting that stuff out, which is absolutely, it's horrible. So if we could make sure that that we deal with that as well. Prevent that. Commissioner Schroeder, you have a question or comment, sir?
Yeah, no, I agree with where we're at on this moving forward, and I think having the public input on it is terrific. But as far as, I think Jennifer has a pretty good idea of what we're looking at for economic development and what would fit well within the community. So I would be comfortable with recommendations coming from you for us to discuss. I think on a grander scope, two things that need to be discussed about this is it a size within the economic development zone appropriate? Right now, it's just based on the parcel, and so and maybe things that are taken out suddenly that goes away and it doesn't become an issue. I don't know, so we kind of have to figure that out. If someone wants to put in a garage, they don't need 80 acres. It wouldn't be reasonable for them to think of that. So maybe some of that just goes away on its own. The other thing, and we had discussed it quite a bit, the prior board internally, the situation that we have at 6 Arrow and the other one, just lost my mind, where they're in the zone, but then they were subdivided and then used it as the economic development zone, where that probably would have been more appropriate as a different zoning through there, with the intention of being for the landowner to be able to utilize the EDZ. And so I don't know how that gets resolved in language, but that was situation we have there and the way it worked out really wasn't the intent, even though that's ended up being what happened. And so, in the future, if we had some way of managing that a little bit better on a more of a 30,000-foot level,
Sure.
I would be in favor of that.
Well, I think if that list is more tailored to those uses that the county truly wants to incentivize, that will help with a lot of that. Because again, it's not prohibiting it from existing, it simply requires it to go through the appropriate zoning or rezoning as necessary. So a question for you all, do you believe that there is a place for any uses that would otherwise require industrial zoning in the EDZ? Or do you think that really needs to be more limited to commercial type uses or uses that are allowed in a commercial zoning? That may be one more question that would help us know where you would like to go.
So give us examples of different uses for industrial versus
Sure.
commercial.
Any type of retail is going to be allowed in a commercial district. Things like distribution centers would be industrial, truck terminals, even some wind generation, things like that. Here's even another piece for you to consider. There are some uses, right? We looked at the hazardous materials being an example that it's not even allowed as a use by right in industrial or commercial zoning. Even in those zoning districts, it required an additional level of review, right? It required a special use by review. So that could be another caveat that maybe the board doesn't want to allow anything that otherwise requires a special use by review to be allowed in the EDZ because that's so incentivized, understanding that the reason it requires an an SUR elsewhere is because there's an understanding that the impacts could require, right, that additional review. Again, that's just sort of one other train of thought that you all could consider.
I would encourage you to focus on commercial rather than industrial. And hopefully, moving forward with the comprehensive plan, we can, on a future planning map, we can
Yes, sir.
determine where that industrial should be.
Absolutely.
So we had discussed that map several times. Has there been any progress on that so far?
So the conversations have started with the
Okay.
steering committee and with the comp plan. There's not a draft map yet.
Okay.
That
That's something
survey
that's
will
in the
help.
future, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect.
But the fairly near future, I mean, the next 8 to 12 weeks.
Yeah. I think that would help this board as we're talking about this, even a draft of something that I think that would be great. If we could do something like that, maybe
Okay.
it would help us. I don't know, gentlemen, commissioners, do you agree?
Yeah, it sure wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, I think so. As I said last week, I was concerned if we did away with the EDZ, suddenly we have no zoning in the county. And so, yeah, to kind of have an idea of which direction we're headed with that map would be helpful.
And so just to clarify, the entire county, there is underlying zoning, right, even under the EDZ. And so that still would be in place, whether the EDZ exists or doesn't exist.
Right.
And the future land use map will look to provide direction on specific areas where future uses, we think they make the most sense. There are ways to amend it, of course, right? The I-70 corridor is a good example, right? Because I think that we can mostly all agree that the uses along the I-70 corridor over there on that eastern side of the county are probably significantly different than uses that are appropriate, right, maybe on Kiowa Bennett Road.
Right.
So it'll help identify some of those for us. So, because right now, you all can get a zoning request for anything, anywhere. And so that can be a lot to consider every time. And so that will provide a first level of guidance. And so really, the EDZ would still be, if it exists, in addition to any zoning that comes in the future. So it's a little bit of a different discussion in terms of the EDZ is really a tool that the county has to incentivize certain types of uses. And I say incentivize, we're obviously not giving, tax rebates or anything like that, but it's a quicker process to approval,
Right.
right? And that is certainly a mechanism that jurisdictions use to incentivize certain types of development,
Got it.
so.
When we make a final determination, do we want to look at the location of the EDZ? Do we want to look at where it is now and look at the current map and have that discussion at the same time we discuss the preferred uses?
Sure.
Is that something we should be open to discussing? I think
I
we
thought we
should
were
at
gonna
least
do
look
that.
at it. I think we should at least look at it and have that discussion.
Of
I
course.
thought that was
Maybe,
going to be
and
part of
maybe,
this.
yeah, maybe find where it's at. I haven't really studied the location and just said, hey, it should stop at this intersection and not go any more forward, because we've been so focused on the uses versus the actual location. So I think we should take a hard look at that and have that as part of the discussion.
And we can certainly do that, absolutely, because once you tailor the uses, it'll be, I think, a little bit easier to look at the locations of where you think that makes sense. So right now, it is a very large area, and we can pull it up if you'd like to see it. But right now, all of those uses are an option in all of those areas.
Can you pull it up? Do you
Yes,
have that
sir.
ability? Thank you.
And just to add to the conversation on the location of those, that was based on the current comp plan that was put together to encourage commercial activity along paved corridors. So that's why we're at where we're at, was based on that, and maybe that changes with the new comp plan, but.
Yeah, look, I think
That's-
it was based
that's where we're
on traffic flows. Yeah. Which makes sense.
Our county is so large, it can be difficult to look at the whole thing. The EDZ is shown in yellow on this map, and I'm going to do my best to zoom in a little bit and give you a feel for parts of Highway 86,
See,
Kiowa Bennett Road. Yes, sir.
well, just looking at that map, when you focused on Kiowa right there, and you went out east, in between Elizabeth and Kiowa, could have been commercial. In between Kiowa and Comanche Creek, could have been industrial. Push the industrial out a little bit further instead of a prime retail corridor between Elizabeth and Kiowa. That could have been something that could have been decided, or could be decided. Just off the top of my head, looking at it.
Absolutely.
Can you go out toward I-70? Does this involve anything, EDZ, out toward the interstate?
It is along I-70, yes, sir.
Okay.
So with
Definitely.
that,
And Highway 24.
with those major corridors like 24, I-70, whatever, maybe we get, particularly I-70, I'm thinking, if you had a separate EDZ zone for the I-70 corridor, that would be different than what's Kiowa Bennett, because we would want to encourage those bigger activities to be up there. There's two different types of EDZ. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but.
I like that idea, actually.
locations.
Yeah, because that's a completely different animal out there compared to what we're trying to do here. I mean, I think that would be a good idea. What do you?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that before, but it's actually a good idea.
Yeah, I agree.
So a little bit more of a commercial and healthcare focus on, for lack of better words, I'm just going to say the western part of the county, maybe west of Kiowa, and then over along Highway 24 and I-70, more of a mix of commercial or industrial?
Agreed. I mean, I don't
Okay.
want to say too much, but I think, there's been some discussions about a feed locker out there. There's been discussions about truck stops, things that we're working on, and I can't get into at the moment. But, yeah, that needs to be a different
Okay,
set.
we could certainly go that route and provide two. Do you all have thoughts on what you would want to call them?
1 and 2.
One and two?
Or east and
Done.
west. I don't care.
Okay.
EDZ east, EDZ west.
Well, and being able to perhaps siphon off some of the warehouse space that's being used at DIA right there along the I-70 corridor would be terrific for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, because that's definitely where warehouse needs to be. It doesn't need to be in between Kiowa and Elizabeth, doesn't need to be in Kiowa Bennett, doesn't need to be in
Right.
some of these areas.
Well, it's just easy access,
Yeah,
and then we
easy
got
access.
railroad, we got our interstate, we got state highways, everything comes together out there, so that's a perfect location for that kind of thing.
Okay, so there's more of an appetite for warehouse or transportation or those types
Industrial,
of
yep.
industrial uses on some of the heavier corridors or heavier transportation corridors, right? Obviously, an
Yep.
interstate highway
Truck
is
stops,
different.
that kind of thing.
Of
Yep.
course, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Well, and the medical equipment place down outside of Simla is a perfect example too, that they utilized Highway 24 because of the shipping ease to get up to I-70 and there. So I think there's some opportunity along 24 as well between Colorado Springs and up to Lyman all the way through there for that as well. And if I remember correctly, you said even Simla was looking forward to having some activity in their neighborhood.
yes, sir, especially a gas station. So am I hearing that the Highway 24 corridor is more open to maybe more options?
Yes.
Than the Highway 86 corridor west of Kiowa?
I
Or
would say
west
so,
of
yeah.
Elizabeth?
It's two different things, yeah. I would
Completely
agree.
different,
Yeah.
okay. I just asked to double check, I don't
No,
want to
no,
assume.
I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, but I mean, we'd like to see 86 at some point when the state retracts or rescinds this moratorium on scenic byways. We'd like to get that done out there, and then fill it up with a bunch of
Okay,
stuff. I mean, we want to keep that as scenic as possible. going through
Okay.
there. Is my opinion.
and how about the Kiowa-Bennett corridor running north-south?
That's a hot potato.
That one's a little harder. There's obviously some proposed residential nearby.
Yeah, so I think it depends again on what type of use you're talking about there.
Okay,
There's obviously going to be a market along there for entrepreneurs and business owners to have a retail or I don't know, whatever else they put up through there. So I don't think we want to say, no, you can't, but again, tailoring it to what makes sense.
okay,
It should be more similar to maybe 13, something like that. Whatever's allowed on 13 would have a similar use maybe along Kiowa Bennett Road, something
okay.
along those lines.
And because I like to cause trouble sometimes, can we spend a minute on RV and boat storage? Do you all want to continue to see that in either EDZ zone or not in either one, and it would simply be allowed where the zoning allows for it?
Who wants to kick off? I guess I can. I'm not in favor of
Okay,
that. I think that it should be where it's supposed to be and not just popping up
necessarily right
everywhere.
here, okay.
And I think we got plenty of RV storage and stuff in this county right now, but,
we might have more RVs than people soon.
or more than cows out here, so, I think it all is about location,
Okay,
safety, appearance, everything, so.
I think that goes back to the size discussion too, because if you're limiting the size, the reason that RV and boat storage works is because they can have a large footprint. And if the footprint is smaller, it's just going to naturally not be a viable option as opposed to dropping the hammer on somebody. But I think that's a more tactful way to address it is on the size. I don't care how many they have out east, up along I-70, all that. So again, that two different zonings.
could be allowed out there, maybe a size restriction over here, Kiowa and west. Do you have any idea what you think an appropriate size limitation would be?
No.
Okay,
I was just going to add, I agree with both of the other commissioners. I think storage should follow industrial.
okay,
If we allow industrial along I-70, then we should encourage storage along I-70.
Sure.
Anything with cyclone fences but
Yes.
storage should be considered almost industrial.
Okay. And any additional, I guess, questions or concerns about some of the EDZ areas closer to Elizabeth? Are we okay with keeping that designation there as long as the uses are tailored to what you all feel is more appropriate, a much shorter list of healthcare, retail, something in that vein?
They might have some input.
They sure might.
I'm good with it,
Okay.
keeping it as long as it's tailored, as you said.
Okay,
I don't do anything that would impact the town of Elizabeth or also, it's about common sense,
sure.
so.
So I guess to recap, what I've heard is that we will review the community survey results from the comp plan when that full package is released at the open house. We'll take a look at those and see what the community had indicated that they're most in favor of in terms of economic development. And then add to that the direction that you all have provided today about 2 different EDZ categories based on the roadway and having specific land uses for each of those. But it sounds like even in both of those, we would still tailor the uses. Is that correct? Or do you want to keep everything as it currently is in what could be the more industrial, high-traffic corridor? High traffic is the wrong word, I apologize for that. The like more transportation corridor along I-70 or 24. So over there, do you want to keep all of the uses that are currently in the EDZ or tailor that down a little bit more?
I think we should look at it and make sure that, I mean, do we want
Okay.
hazardous waste anywhere in the county?
Right.
Do we want to encourage hazardous waste anywhere? That might be something you say, hey, we don't necessarily need to encourage that or incentivize that, but it's still allowed.
Always.
You know, something like that. So we may
Okay.
still want to look at it for both zones.
Okay,
Besides just, oh, well, let's just allow everything that's on the current list. I think we should still, I think Mr. McDaniel said, use some common sense.
okay,
So,
I'm concerned out east, just throw it out there, with these sludge farms. And I can't get into a lot of details, but I know that there's been some discussion about maybe some additional land being used for that.
oh, okay,
And we cannot, that's something that's hazardous, the runoff, and it gets down into the water table. I mean, there's a lot of issues with that. So I just want to make sure that we're looking out east, that we've got something in there that gives us the ability to really dive into that and say yes or no.
okay. I'll take a look at the uses and make sure that if there's anything in that area that's
so
pulled out and addressed separately.
So to kind of get off in the weeds a little bit, are we only aware of the one farm that you're aware of? Is there more out there?
There's one right on the county line that's actually in Lincoln County that's running off into Elbert County. There is the farm just south of, or in Matheson. There is some discussion about expanding that, and we've got some great concerns. The health department's looking at this, the state's looking at this.
That's something that comes before the county. We'll see that. If somebody wants to build
Well,
one or
We hope so.
expand one, we would see it, right?
We would hope so, but looking back at the records, of course, records back, way back, like several boards ago, there's really nothing there. It shows the approval of it and the way well, this thing could go into legal, so I guess I need to just hush with that.
Yeah, we
I'll-
probably should stay out of the weeds on that. Are you referring to biosolids?
Yeah,
Okay, so
And
for
the chemicals.
clarification, biosolids is what we're talking about now.
yeah.
We need to, stay on point on this. But something else to bring to your attention when we're talking about economic development is when we lost our economic development director and our economic development specialist, we have not moved forward with rehiring a economic development specialist or manager to focus on what the board wants to do with economic development in the county. Staff has been waiting for you all to let us know what the philosophy is going to be moving forward for these areas, and what type of person you want to hire as far as qualifications, experience, if you want to even move in that direction at all, or continue to leave all that extra work with Jennifer Jones in that department. So something else to think about as we go through the budget process, is that a position you're wanting to refill or redraft? Or do we even want an economic development specialist or a manager in the department? So something else to think about.
I'd be in favor of that, but I think before we move in that direction, we need to get all this stuff worked out so that it's not so complicated and they walk in and they've got to, here it is, let's go, you know.
Yes, that's a great idea that we get the answers to these, but also keep in mind, it's not a bad idea to hire someone at some point. If they come in as this stuff is being created, then they're going to have that information already because they've been a part of the process. So just something else to think about since we're going through the budget process. Nothing needs to be decided, but we are going to need to have a decision that tells staff what you want to do with economic development at some point.
Noted, and I would think that, I mean, this has been good discussion here this morning, but I think we need to have several of these discussions, and I know we have nothing but meetings lined up back to back, but this is something that's important to the county. I think we need to meet often and nail this thing down, and we need to do it sooner than later, if we can. So we can, you know, the planning commission, everybody is depending upon this, all of us are. So thank you for the work you're doing on this, I appreciate that. And Lance, your input and backup, and of course, always our county manager here pulls me out of the weeds every day, so appreciate you. Is any other comments or anything else we needed to go over, discuss?
I think we can just talk about process and next steps for just a minute, just
Sure.
to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Sure.
It sounds like, to me, what would be most helpful is if we had another one of these work sessions, and we can then sort of present some draft options to you. And maybe they're not even drafts yet, but maybe some ideas, and see if we're getting close to what you're thinking in terms of the two different districts and the specific uses. And we can take a look at those survey results at that time, and make sure that what we're doing is in line with those, or if there's any surprises there.
Okay.
Does that sound okay with you all? Another work session in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I don't know if we want to wait a couple of weeks. I mean, I
Okay.
mean, we could do next week and get this thing moving. You know, if we could get a map, maybe. I know you've got it on your computer, but
Okay.
I'd like to have a hard
Yes, sir,
copy of
paper
a
map.
map. It's
Okay.
color-coded, and maybe we can write on it and do, you know,
Okay,
whatever we need to do, and then.
real planning, okay.
Yeah.
We can do that. We won't have the survey results until the 16th.
Right.
So maybe we could do the following Monday. I can work with Macy on your calendars. I
So
don't
let
need
me-
you to
let-
commit
let me
at
ask-
this
Let
moment.
me ask this question. I know the survey results are not going to be released until the 16th, but why can't we get the survey results now and we can start looking at them now, and then we can get the wheel rolling, because right now I feel like we're just spinning our wheels.
Okay,
What do y'all think? I mean, I don't think that would be a problem. We won't release it to anybody. We'll keep it here between us, but
okay.
Yeah, we don't even need a copy of it. We could just look at it.
I think
Okay.
I think that would be the thing to do. So we can start studying it now, when we come back here in a week, and we can start nailing some stuff down.
I like the idea of a week from Monday, because I'll be out all next week.
I'm sorry, sir?
I'll be out next week.
Okay, so then we can follow
We
up.
do that Monday.
Okay.
So one of the things I want to bring up today is this is just a small sampling of rule and regulation change recommendations. So I have seven here I want to introduce today. So I will give you guys copies of them. I would encourage you guys to bring your recommendations to the table as well, if you guys have any recommendations. If you don't, that's fine. But I want to get these in front of the Planning Commission, have them discuss it, analyze it, vote on it, and bring it back, and bring these decisions back to the board we make the decisions and combine it with the decisions we're discussing today, so that we're not doing 2 or 3 little changes, and all of a sudden we have Amendment 6, and then all of a sudden we have Amendment 7 or whatever, and we're refiling and we're re-recording every little change that we decide to make, and we can do a little bit larger batches at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this out, and then for our next meeting, we can discuss it if we don't want to discuss them today.
So this is 7, but why, to your point, I think that we can do more than 7. I mean, if we do 5, 6, or 7 at a time, and it has to go before the planning commission, and it's back and forth, we'll be sitting here this time next year still talking about it. I think that maybe we all sit down, I've got some, and I'm sure Commissioner Schroeder's got some. And we put them all together and then present it to the planning commission. And maybe they have to have a special meeting or something, I know, because they're loaded up with things, but that's fine with me, we could figure it out.
But Jennifer can make that happen and bring them to the planning commission. They have ideas as well that they can bring forward and discuss. So all I'm saying is I don't want to go back with the 3 or 4 ideas that we had and do a update to our regulations with just 3 or 4 changes, and then we have to go back a month later with another 3 or 4. I bring some, and then 2 months later, Commissioner McDaniel brings a couple, and I mean, let's get serious about it. We don't have a pause. We don't have a moratorium. We have to do it now if we're going to make any changes. I mean, the hope was, hey, let's put some of these developments on hold. Let's get our map in place. Let's get our rules and regulations changed, open it back up, ready for business. Elbert County is ready to go. We hire a economic development manager, and we push out some economic development. But that was kind of the plan. But now we need to start moving on these rule and regulation changes and discussing them. Some people will like, some people won't like. But we need to have those discussions. So I'm sitting on these. I wanted to just introduce them. We can, have everybody look at it and discuss it at a later meeting if we want. But I encourage the other commissioners to bring theirs forward. Encourage the planning commission to get theirs and schedule a planning commission meeting that they can go over it as soon as possible. That's all I had.
Well, I'll just add to that, and I'll say that the benefit of the delay on the moratorium is that we have a chance to talk about some of these issues like we are today that would affect small business owners, and so we're here today doing that, and I think this is a smart way to do it. And we can get it done if we'll just roll up our sleeves and dig in. I think we can get it done quickly.
So just to clarify and qualify some of these suggestions that I had, the ideas are pretty much what it says they are. The talking points would be, let's say, the distance or the density. So that would be what would be up for discussion. Would be, okay, is 5 acres appropriate? Is it 1 unit per 5 acres? That would be the discussion. Or is it 1 unit per 1 acre? Something like that. So like, for example, the very first one, it says all PUDs over 50 units need to be noticed up to 2640 feet. So that's a larger impact for the community. Is 1,320 feet far enough? I don't think so. It's a big impact. You got some of these large developments going in, and you're going out a quarter mile. That's miles of impact. So I think that should be increased, at least doubled. So that would be, okay, that would be something up to discussion. Should it be 1,320, or should we double it to 2,640, or should it be a full mile? I don't know. But that's something I think we should at least talk about. So that's kind of, and you'll see that in some of these questions or comments here.
I just want to add a comment on number 1 here on these PUDs over 50. I think it's a good idea, but can we add to that water and talk about water and talk about a requirement that they have to go deeper, and so we're not in the upper or lower?
That's in the number 7. And I
Okay.
had a water attorney by the name of Scott Clark draft that language
Okay.
for us. So when you read that deals with water.
Okay.
But it might not even be 50 units. Back to number one, it might not even be 50 units. It might
Right.
be 100, it might be 25. So when you see the qualifiers in there, we're looking for triggers, I guess is the right word. What's the trigger for this regulation to be enacted? So I think trigger is the right word for that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I think, we do 25 houses here, 25 houses there. I mean, we've got to do something about the water and the requirements to make them drill deeper, and I know it's maybe sometimes it's very costly, but that's just the situation, that's where we're at. I mean, that's just what they're gonna have to, in my opinion.
I agree.
So, you wanna build here, you're gonna have to drill deeper for water, so.
So those questions or recommendations in regards to water, they were vetted through a water attorney. They were vetted through Douglas County. They were vetted through the Colorado Division of Water Resources. So,
Okay. Anything else? There you go.
I think that provides a lot of direction on the EDZ. Do we want to talk about those other two potential changes that I think were maybe a little bit easier? Or you
yeah,
want to wait and do
I
that?
think it would take 5 minutes to get through
Yeah, could you-
those. I think we
Yes.
all agree.
Put it on the board.
Yes, sir.
And then we just save them. We don't do a new recording and filing, but we just have those out of the way.
So the concept brief was another topic that had come up. I know that there's been some good examples and bad examples of concept briefs. There are certainly some benefits to doing it, but there were some concerns that had come up as well. So the recommendation had come up to completely eliminate it. And so we can certainly chat about how you all feel. Does it just need to be tweaked like other things, or do you want to keep it, or do you want to get rid of it?
I initially wanted to get rid of it. I think it puts it back onto the county to become aware. It says it's a formal review, and my concern is if we miss something glaring, they would come back and say, well, you guys sounded like you liked it, you gave us encouragement, you pushed it along in the process, and now as soon as you come to a hearing, you turn it down. We just spent an additional $200,000 in engineering fees. Now, that could be something that Lance speaks to, but the way our language in our guidelines read, that's kind of what it says. So there's some concern there from a legal perspective that I was like, why are we setting ourselves up for that? Why would we do that? So,
Mr. Schroeder?
Well, I've stated I've always liked listening to them. I guess, is Lance comfortable with those, or Commissioner Buck's concerns something we should be aware of?
Trying to see how loud this is going to be. So I think we can support legally whatever process the board decides is the most effective for the board. The question becomes, how do we maintain the records and how do we ensure due process? So the concept brief is, as I understand it, something that happens before an application is officially on file. It's an opportunity for the applicant or potential applicant to present to the board their ideas for what their future property use may be. There are counties, just to be blunt, there are counties in the state that would not allow that meeting to take place. They would consider it an ex parte communication on a land use application, even though the application is not pending yet. And they believe that the proper due process line is to not allow a meeting like that. There are other counties that draw a bright line at the time of application. Once an application is on file, then rules with respect to communications with the commissioners, the decision makers, kick in. But before that, they don't kick in. So it depends on where you allow those communications to start. The fact that this is part of your process and that there is presumably some form of public notice, at least that the board is having a meeting, really mitigates concerns about it being an ex parte communication, a communication that the public can't be party to, that they can't know what was said. Commissioner, I think your concern about the applicant feeling misled is a legitimate one. It doesn't invalidate the process, but certainly if an potential applicant comes in and presents to you what they think they want to do, if they think they get positive feedback, spend $200,000 only to be denied down the road, that's certainly something they're not going to be happy with. So there are ways to deal with that. There's ways to make crystal clear that the board's not making a decision. All they're doing is they have the opportunity to ask questions, but nothing should be taken as an indication of support for the ultimate land use. Landowners are going to do with that what they will, but we can mitigate the risks of that being an actual county liability issue substantially. It shouldn't be, that's not what the process is intended to be. At the same time, you don't want to be misleading. You don't want to see a land use that you are going to have difficulty supporting because of compatibility or other issues that you nonetheless give tacit encouragement for them to pursue it, or they interpret it as that. So how do you walk that line? I think we can figure out those details. But the fact that it's part of your regulatory process, the public would presumably, again, be allowed to be a witness to that concept brief process, that what was proposed. It all mitigates against liability. It mitigates against a due process violation. It can be okay. So it's all in how you execute it. What do you want? What do you want the result to be? And then how do we implement it? So standing alone, I can't tell you that that is a good or a bad process from a legal standpoint. I can tell you it seems to have its merits, and we can absolutely ensure that there's not a due process issue if you continue to utilize it. So it becomes a question then, what does the board want? What does the board benefit from? And then let's make sure what that thing is something that we've put the effort behind to make sure your record and your process is documented in a way where there's no risk, there's no due process concern.
Got it? Thank you.
In the order of events, where does the concept brief before the public presentation, public meeting, or after?
That's a good question. I'm going to look and make sure before I answer it you wrong.
My thought process is going on what we just heard, that would be the first time that the public would be aware of something, if this is if it's the first thing that takes place. The other thing, we've always taken the stance that up until time of application, we would be, people come talk to us about ideas and things along the line, but it might be individually where the concept brief forces it to be out in the public. So it's just another consideration. I'm not going to die on the hill one way or the other, but I do think in the past it has been beneficial.
Something, if you all decided you wanted to keep it, I know something that we have struggled with is it doesn't have real specific guidelines, right? And so like many things, it could be made better if you want to keep it, right? What is the threshold? I think that someone had decided in the past, I don't know who or how, right, that 100 lots was going to be the threshold, but that may not be what you all want. And so another way to handle it would be to put some specifics. We want to see a concept brief if, right? Is it straight zoning? Is it only PUD zoning? Is it a certain size? Is it a certain amount of units? Is it a certain, would you ever want to see one for a non-residential project? So there's a lot of options there as well. And I have to be getting close to your answer.
Yeah, no problem. Well, we think about having more industrial, commercial zoning out by I-70, and then you're starting to talk about a complex, right? If a big developer comes in with a complex, I could see where having that initial conversation on a larger complex like that would be interesting, if not beneficial, to see what the thought process.
Absolutely. So right now they are completely at CDS discretion. Again, we had been operating under 100 lot threshold potentially. That we do have a pre-app meeting, a community meeting, and then a concept brief. So it does, they have had an opportunity to interact with the public, at least initially.
So it would give us the same opportunity to be at the level of the public at that point.
Yes, sir.
I just don't feel comfortable saying anything at the concept brief. So, for example, yeah, maybe if it looked like this and you had this over here, we're not making any decisions today, but maybe, oh, okay, well, Mr. Buck might approve that if I made those changes. Well, he comes back 3 months later and I said, no, I don't like it. It's just not fair to them to encourage them, or I could just sit there and not say anything. Or say, hey, I don't think I like it, but I'm not making a decision. I mean, I guess might be able to say that. I don't know, it's awkward for me. I think it's a courtesy to the applicant. I don't see much value in it. There's enough other processes that we already have. We have a community meeting, we have a planning commission department for a reason, we have a planning department for a reason, and then we have our board meetings for a reason. We could always continue a board meeting, get all the information from the first meeting that we have, and then if we say, oh, maybe let's discuss it some more, we want more details, we have a second meeting about it. But to have a one-off concept brief that we're putting ourselves out there in an awkward situation, I just don't like them, and the way our regulations are written, it puts it back on us to make those decisions, and there would be some, ill will if we turn something down after giving them any encouragement or making any recommendations of change to their plan. So I don't see the value in it.
Lance, do you think there's some exposure to liability? As you said earlier, I know they're different counties, but if we were to say the wrong thing or give the wrong impression, somebody goes out and spends $200,000 and then we turn around and deny it. I mean, is that some exposure there to liability?
I think depending on how the concept brief process is handled, it can lend itself to very little to no risk of liability or some risk. It just depends on how it's handled and what an applicant comes away with. And so I'm sensitive to the concerns being raised by Commissioner Buck. If you say, hey, I'm not sure I like this, I think you're going to have compatibility problems at the front end. Well, an applicant could turn that into, well, you pre-decided the issue. As a matter of due process, I didn't get my due process because before I even ever started, you decided no, and when this process was over, you said no, and that's just my proof. So there's some really good land use attorneys out there that can make arguments like that all day long, and so I can tell you, gosh, there's no risk, but that type of thing always exists. But if you have a process that's very public, that anyone can see what was provided to the commissioners, what comments were made, if the commissioners are careful not to make comments that are too positive or too negative, and it's clear that it is a process that's limited to advisory only and for initial perceptions only, I think you can mitigate substantially any risks that would come from it. I can never tell you there's none.
Yeah.
There's too many attorneys out there that'll turn in any statement into,
So
this is proof that.
So why would we risk anything? There's a small risk, why risk it?
Yeah, if it's beneficial to the board. I'm not telling you do it or don't do it. If the board feels the benefits outweigh any potential risks, then we need to make sure you get that benefit in some form.
I think where it could become useful would be in something that's really novel that you haven't seen before, right? Another small lot residential project, I don't know that that's extremely beneficial to the board or to the applicants, the feedback that they're going to get, right? The regulations are what they are. If there was something that was truly unique and that the county had never seen, and we had the option to require a concept brief, I feel like that's where there could be something really helpful because the board could provide some initial feedback that that this could be interesting or this could be beneficial to the county or, how many jobs would this create and those types of conversations. In my mind, that's where it could be helpful. I don't think that's how it has really been used so far, but that could be Right, there are uses out there that some jurisdictions want them and really try to get them because they think they're so beneficial, and other jurisdictions don't want them at all. And so certainly applicants don't know if a county or a jurisdiction hasn't seen something like that before.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Schroeder, anything else, sir?
No, that's interesting comments. Perhaps we lay it, hate to keep throwing stuff on Jennifer, but at staff discretion, if it is something unusual that you feel would be beneficial, then we go ahead and put in there, so we could just add at staff's discretion, whether there's a concept brief or not.
Well,
You know,
how
if
about,
we see another large PUD, they're relatively all the same. But something unique, I think, is interesting to think about.
I was just going to say, it could be BOC discretion, BOCC discretion. Staff makes the recommendation, we decide if we want to hear it, then we move forward. Just a thought.
I'd actually be more concerned with that than the process as it exists, because now you're asking the board to weigh in if they even want to hear more information at the front end. Yes, or, so it just starts one half step sooner that the board's asked to weigh in on a potential application. So what may work is, I think what Dallas was proposing is, if staff's discretion is limited to the uniqueness of a specific application, so it's not anything that staff decides, but it's a fairly narrow subset of applications you may see. I think that narrows down the process to only those things that are truly unique. It's not every PD, for example. It's not every rezoning. It's only those that are truly unique. And maybe that limits the use of so it meets all of the commissioners' needs. You tell me, I'm not trying to tell you.
Okay. Commissioner Buck, anything else, sir?
No, I just want to know if we're going to make a decision today, or we're going to vote, or if we're going to table it for another discussion.
We
We're
can't
not
make
gonna
any
vote.
decisions. Yeah, we can't do
Yeah.
that today.
You're right.
You could give staff some direction what to bring back for further deliberation, but anything you give staff direction on today is not a decision. It is indication of the direction the board may want to go, but until you've made a final decision at a true public hearing or business meeting, you haven't made a decision.
Understood.
Anything else?
Let's do the 18-month real quick.
Okay.
I think the only other one is the 18-month. The 3-year landscape warranty period has fallen by the wayside.
Right.
The 18-month time frame for community meetings.
So when we talked about that, I think the way it was presented, or I was confused about it, so I'd just like to make that clear, that we're not saying it takes 18 months to get something done. So if you would clarify that at the front end, I would appreciate it.
Sure. So there was a concern that for some projects, the amount of time that had passed from the required community meeting to the first public hearing was too long. And so there was a request or direction to put in a time frame. Now, what that time frame is part of the debate, right? Is it 12 months, 15 months, 18 months, 24 months? It could be anything in there. I think 18 months is what had been kind of decided or provided as an option. And so it's up to you all if you think that's appropriate, or if you want it to be a different number, or if you don't want there to be a time frame at all.
Commissioner Schroeder? Sir.
Yeah, well, we've talked about time frame before, and I think it's appropriate somewhere that there's a time frame. As I've been thinking about this since the last meeting, and the discussion we had was perhaps again at staff's discretion. You know, if it ends up being 19 months, then it probably doesn't matter. I would be interested in language that would allow anywhere from the 18th month up through the 24th month to be at staff discretion, if there needs to be another one, but have that hard cutoff be at the 24-month period to say this is going to have to go back to the community. I think we can trust staff to say, yeah, there's been little change, just because it's another month doesn't require, but 2 years, there's some issues with that, I think.
Okay, Commissioner Buck?
I would just like to say, I agree that at the 24-month period, that would definitely be too long no matter what it was. And that's kind of what prompted this discussion, because we had seen some that were 2.5 years old and different things, and there was no time frame on it at all. So I think the objective is to get some parameters for a community meeting. And 18 months, I think, is a good number. Now, whether we want to have staff discretion between that 18th and 24-month, that additional 6-month period, that's up to discussion, I guess.
Or let me ask this, would there be potential for staff discretion to require a second community meeting based on significant changes to the project? So, right, not because of timeline necessarily, right? Maybe we're only 9 months in, but the project has changed so significantly from what was originally presented that, right, staff felt that another community meeting would be beneficial. Right now, we suggest that, but we can't require it. So that could be a way to solve two potential issues, right? The time frame, but also making sure that the public has the most current information, because that's the hardest thing, right, is when the public is still concerned about, you know, what they heard or even what was originally presented, but that's no longer what's on the table.
So you're saying potentially the window could be longer than 6 months, from 18 to 24 months. It could be 9 months up to 24 months. You could decide, hey, everything's changed, the project's changed, there's been some development in the area, other things have been approved, and it's only been, let's say, 12 months. I think they need another community meeting. I think there needs to be a hard cap and a hard line. At some point, they need to have a second meeting. But you're saying, from what I'm hearing, is you don't want to have to wait 18 months if things change dramatically prior to the 18 months.
Right, so I'm saying, right, that we could have policy direction from the board that doesn't have to be in the regulations, but because of staff discretion, if staff has the discretion to require an additional meeting, we could do that when we felt it was necessary, whether it was just because of time passing, right? And you all could set that policy, right? The policy is that after 12 months, we will require another one. The alternative being, we may want to require another one, not because of the time, but because of the significance of the changes.
Yeah.
So I feel like that would be helpful as well, and I think it helps to solve, you know, some of the concerns, right? The idea is always to make sure that the public is informed, right? But informed with good information. That's always my biggest concern, that they have good information.
Well, I like your idea, and I think there's a language there that satisfies both of those concerns, that there's some discretion involved, and there's a hard cap.
Yes.
So I think we could make that work.
Yeah, I agree.
Does that sound like an
No,
option?
I agree. And maybe next time we have some language along those lines.
Yes, sir.
And also on what the concept brief adjustment might look like too, with those same ideas.
And what is the direction on concept brief? To keep it or get rid of it, or keep it for unique things only?
I'd like to see some language on unique things only.
Okay.
Just so we can continue the conversation.
Hopefully it'll be more technical than that.
Well,
What's deemed unique?
for reference, look at our language on concept briefs currently. So if you read that, that's what I did, was I read it and became concerned. So I would want it to read quite differently than what we currently have.
Sure. We could also do it based on land area, you know, if there was a concern about anything over 1,000 acres, right, that's so significant that you all wanted to hear from them, or something like that, so. But
Why
we can
don't
put
you-
together some basic language.
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't you put together
Okay.
maybe bullet points, some ideas that you've got, and then
Options.
come back to us and let us look at it and
Okay. We can
have
do
some
that.
talking points that we can discuss.
Yes, sir. This has been very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Anything else?
We did have a couple other options. They want to take number 4 off the table. But we did advertise for a couple other topics, if you all still have time to discuss.
Sure.
I believe Lance has an SIA issue for you next.
I'm going to hand this out. You've seen this electronically a couple times previously, but it's a draft of a Form SIA that I'd like the board to consider adopting in some form, if not this form, another. And so I'll say more in a minute.
So to clarify, this is the same one you sent us electronically? Did you make any changes since then, or is it virtually the same? Okay. Because I read this and I didn't have any issues with the language that it already outlines.
There's a couple extra copies if anyone wants to.
So to Mike's, or I'm sorry, Commissioner Buck's comments, this is the last one you sent to us electronically that we reviewed.
It should be, yes.
There have been
So-
no changes to that?
No changes have been made since it was last emailed to you, but the board has also never had a chance to weigh in on this as a potential form. So let me kind of big picture summarize what this is. For every approved subdivision by statute, the county is supposed to have a subdivision improvement agreement. And a subdivision improvement agreement is essentially the document that ensures that the public improvements related to that subdivision are constructed and constructed to county standards. So typically, those public improvements are roads. They can also be parks. Anything that is going to be public in nature that is going to be a requirement of the subdivision would typically be in a subdivision improvement agreement. Now, since I've been with the county, under contract and otherwise, I've seen a variety of forms of subdivision improvement agreements, but very few of them really stick with the line of what is intended by statute for that agreement to include. And so I think it would benefit the county if the county had a standard form and had some parameters for staff to deviate from that form in limited fashion. I can say there's different types of agreements in the land use statutes that can apply to development. There's what's called a development agreement or a vested rights agreement. Those are kind of used interchangeably, and those can extend the period that, let's say you approve a final plat. A final plat is typically vested for a period of 3 years by statute, that the developer can go forward with that final plat for a period of up to 3 years without any action by the county. A county couldn't do anything about it. That's what vested by statute means. A development agreement, though, extends that. For whatever circumstances the county deems important, the county can extend that vested right for a longer period of time. Those are not uncommon agreements, but they're different from an SIA. An SIA is all about the public improvements, whereas a development agreement or vested rights agreement is about the period of vesting and how long a developer is going to have to build out a project. I've seen several instances where these documents are one and the same, and they really serve different purposes. So I would never tell you that if you have a vested rights agreement that you should do anything other than honor it. You should honor every agreement you've entered into. That's the nature of an agreement. But I would say moving forward, I would encourage you that an SIA be an SIA and a development agreement be a development agreement, and don't kind of mix up the two. So what this is this is a fairly standard subdivision improvement agreement. It defines a process for the county to ensure that the public improvements are built to county standards and that the improvements are accepted by the county. And by the county, we need to talk about a little bit more. There's also security posted for the public improvements so that if they're not constructed or if they're not constructed to county standards, there's a mechanism for the county to potentially step in and complete the improvements so that lot owners that unsuspectingly bought a lot thinking they could get a building permit can still do that. And so big picture, this is set up, it's a standard type subdivision improvement agreement. It requires security to be posted by a developer in the form of a letter of credit to secure the public improvements, and then it defines ownership of those public improvements and a process for accepting them and releasing the security. So that's big picture. That's what an SIA, I believe, is supposed to do. That's what this form does. But this form is different from what the county does in a couple significant ways. Letter of credit is an example of one major difference. I think that everything I've seen in Elbert County so far, at least, requires a bond. A bond is a form of security for sure. It is less simple for the county to draw on if the county should ever need to draw on it. I've often described it that if you have to draw on a bond, what you get is guaranteed litigation. If you want to draw on a letter of credit, what you get is cash. That's really the difference if you need to draw on the security. But letters of credit are a little more expensive. They're not favored by developers, and this isn't intended to be adversarial. The question becomes, what does the county want, and what pushback is the county willing to accept? So bonds, again, standard form of security. They are accepted. They have been clearly accepted by the county. I would suggest you consider letters of credit. That's what this draft would require, but that's a change. So I want to highlight that for you so you don't step in something unexpectedly. This is different from how you do it. Another thing that's in this agreement that I think requires further conversation is this agreement anticipates that all public improvements would actually be owned by the county and maintained by the county. So interior subdivision roads is an example of something I understand the county has made a decision in recent months or years that interior public roads are not going to be maintained by the county. They will instead be maintained by either a special district or by an HOA. And while that's a fine decision to make, it's different in kind from what's in front of you. What's in front of you would indicate that the county would own and maintain all public improvements. And so we need to modify this or modify the decision what the county's going to own and maintain, one or the other. And it doesn't matter to me, but again, standard form would suggest that public improvements are owned by the county. That's not necessarily the case in Elbert County, but I didn't want to modify the form without first having a conversation. So let me pause. Let me just stop there and just ask if there's any questions about big picture, what this agreement is, what it's for, and what I'm proposing.
We've got a couple of questions for you.
Okay?
Our road and bridge made it very clear that they don't have the resources, manpower, or funding to be taking care of road maintenance in these subdivisions. So we need to make sure that the developer is responsible for these interior roads. It's just my opinion. The other two board members have their opinion, their option to talk about that in just a minute. The other thing I want to mention in here, is it possible to put some language in here that the developer has to require water study or any kind of requirements that we can put in there that says they have to drill deeper into different aquifers? Is that possible?
I think in concept, the county can require that, but not in a subdivision improvement agreement.
Okay.
Again, I'm trying not to blur the lines between what this agreement is truly intended for statutorily and what's in it. So I would not encourage you to put anything extraneous in this agreement. Should be all about the public improvements, how they get constructed, and potentially who's going to own and maintain them.
Okay, so then I'll come back to the first question, the deal about the road maintenance. I think that needs to be either, right now, just my opinion, it needs to be a responsibility. The language needs to show it's a responsibility of the developer, or the HOA, or whoever, not the county, until, and they can always approach the county for us to accept the roads, just like some of these others, Spring Valley and things, but that would be up to the board at that time. So Commissioner Schroeder, you got any comments, sir?
Well, that might get a little sticky if you're giving them the option to come back instead of it being clear. Have to think about that for a minute. But we even have the developer, Spring Valley, that was in favor of keeping them just because they didn't want damage done to some of the sidewalks and that sort of thing. I know our Pub Works was concerned with the size of our snow removal equipment versus the size of residential streets. And if there's parking on the side of the road, it makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for there to be snow removal. So that was kind of the beginning of the conversation of letting the developer, whatever it is, through the Metro District or HOA, whatever, maintain and then be part of that snow removal process. Just because we simply can't, with our current equipment we have and how people park, it just wasn't going to work.
Well, and to be clear, I'm not trying to challenge what the county has decided makes sense. If not making or not maintaining internal roads makes sense for the county, I just want to make sure that happens in a legitimate way. I'm not here to challenge it. What I would suggest is, and I've had this conversation with Jennifer at least initially, I think every one of your plats should indicate ownership and maintenance responsibility for public improvements. And so if you have internal roads, let me just for my purposes call them ABC, but you have what are going to be legitimate county roads, I'm going to call them 1, 2, 3. I think the final plat could make clear that roads 1, 2, 3 are being dedicated to and accepted by the county, whereas roads A, B, C are being dedicated to and accepted by either a district or an HOA or some combination of the two. I think that should be on your final plats. It's common that that is the case. And whatever entity is accepting it should be signing the final plat. So if that's going to be an HOA, you can create an HOA at the time you're getting a subdivision or other document approved, and you can have that entity sign the document at the front end. So whether it's a metro district or an HOA or the county's easy because we do sign plats. We just make clear what we're accepting. I think that should be on all your plats. So there's no debate down the road what was intended. It's a simple change to make or tweak to make to what you already do. And this would then dovetail with that. This wouldn't redefine anything. It would simply implement what the final plat and final county approval decided.
So we also, these larger developments have their own parks and we don't want to get into where we're maintaining and mowing and doing all that.
Same idea.
That same place where we're at with that. I would encourage us to, before we make a final decision with that particular deal, that we re-engage with Monty at Public Works just to make sure that we're still on the same page with that, with what his capabilities are.
I'm not going to bring you a final draft unless Monty and Dale have read it and agreed. I can tell you that my initial conversations with them is they really love the idea of going to something like this, and they didn't have any particular objections with the form. But that said, there is language in here about the county accepting all public improvements, and that's not the current status quo. It can't stay that way.
Okay. Commissioner Bulk, sir. Leon.
I got it. Here you go. So if I heard you correctly, are you saying if it's in the plat designating roads 1, 2, and 3 to be county maintained and 4, 5, 6 will be the metro district maintained or HOA maintained, if it says it on the plat, we don't need to modify this form in any way, or would you still suggest we modify the form to establish who maintains those internal roads?
This form would be modified slightly regardless, because right now it says the county is going to own and maintain all public improvements. So that this is not correct as written.
Okay, so that was my question. I didn't know if you were gonna just have it included on the plats and we didn't need to modify this, or if you still felt you needed to modify it.
Well, if the board agrees that having that clarity on the final plat makes sense moving forward, I'll tailor this accordingly.
Yeah.
And so it'll reference the final plat, that thing which lends itself to the need for an SIA. But that's an easy change to
No,
make.
I like that idea.
But the final plat should define who's going to own and who's going to maintain things. And there shouldn't be a lot of debate down the road. I didn't agree to that. I didn't. You have plats where the county's accepted roads and really didn't comment on maintenance. And I think that debate will rage for decades, because I've seen those debates. And I've seen them decades after final plats were approved. So I think moving forward, the county should clean that up. And I think assigning ownership and maintenance responsibilities at the time of final plat is the most comprehensive way to do that, and the way that simply makes the most sense. This is an easy document to change. You still want the improvements done to a county standard, or if you're modifying a county standard, the agreement can be modified accordingly. But then ownership is as defined in the plat, or the final county approval.
Yeah, I agree with the current policy where the internal roads are maintained by the Metro District, not the county. And the concern from the citizens was wait a minute, we can't maintain some of the roads we already have. Why are we taking on all these additional responsibilities when you're putting us to the back burner and our roads, are a concern, and now we're going to take on these additional roads? So that was the concern. So I agree with the policy that's currently been in place, and I would recommend we modify the form.
So the other conversation around that is the difference on collectors and arterials, and where that may stand. We've had extensive discussions about Spring Valley and Augusta Loop, where that should fall in a future subdivision that doesn't have anybody that lives on Augusta Loop or whatever that our collector is, but it's still within the subdivision. How do we navigate that road? So maybe some specificity on those type of roads too would be beneficial also.
Thank you, sir. All right, anything else?
The final topic for today, and we don't have to get into it very far, maybe it's just food for thought, is some questions about this board's philosophy for code compliance or code enforcement, whatever you want to call that. I have heard some things from, the past. I don't want to assume that those are true with you all, and so it would be helpful to hear from you all, again, your philosophy, your general direction on how that should be handled. For example, are we, is the county going to be complaint-driven for code compliance? If yes, what exactly does that look like? Meaning, are you all willing to make complaints? Do you expect staff to make complaints if we see things? Are anonymous complaints allowed? Things like that. So again, just things for maybe you all to start thinking about, or if you have initial feedback today. But I do think that it would be helpful to understand from you all exactly what your expectations and your philosophy are.
All right, Lance?
Yeah, and I want to add to that because Jennifer and I have had a chance to talk about this a little bit. So complaint-driven typically means that you have a formal complaint from someone that there is a violation that they want pursued by the county. And that has some repercussions. So if you're complaint-driven, it means you're not driving around looking for violations on your own. You don't expect staff to bring in violations. You actually wait for a complaint. And so one of the repercussions is you might actually see a violation, but if no one's complaining about it, you're not necessarily going to treat that as something that needs enforcement activity. So that's one of the forks in the roads you get to fairly quickly if you're complaint-driven. Another one you get to fairly quickly is if you're complaint-driven, is that complaint a public record? And in a past life, I've concluded that it is, and that the identification of the complainant is a public record as well. And you can imagine the repercussions of that. If you've got a neighbor complaining about a neighbor and they can get a copy of that complaint, then they're going to know exactly who complained, and it's not unusual that they then become a complainant and announce their own processes and enforcement. There's other ways to do it. There is times where a commissioner may see a violation and it's significant enough that they want to see a complaint. Well, it might be that they want the director of community development to be a complainant on an issue that is so obvious that a commissioner brings it in and says, hey, I want you to fill out a complaint form and pursue this. There's different ways to look at it. Jennifer asked the question, could it be an anonymous complaint? You can imagine the repercussions of that. Who made the complaint? Did they really make a complaint? What did they say? So whatever line you draw, I would just ask you to think about some of the at least initial repercussions. We'll do whatever you want, but there's some real policy behind what you decide. I can tell you I'm familiar with a county in the metro area that at last check they had 7 different code enforcers that would drive around looking for violations, and they would fill out complaint forms as many a day as they could find, and they would report them, and they would start a process. And I think they use it still as a revenue mechanism. It could be something as simple as weeds that are too high, and for them, that's the way they want to do it. That's what they feel best represents the county and their citizens, and that's how they want it. I'm familiar with at least one other county in the metro area that is entirely complaint-driven and will only act on a complaint. And they do consider the complaint to be a public record. And so all those forks in the road I was telling you about, they've made their decisions, and they're willing to deal with the repercussions of the way that naturally falls out. But help us help you. We're told we're complaint-driven, but we don't have that clear direction. We have a couple issues we're dealing with right now that are pretty bad. They both involve trash and dumping and stuff that really needs to be dealt with. But as we move forward, I think we need to better define our process so that staff knows they're implementing the decisions of the board and not some ghost of boards past. We need to understand that we're doing things the way you want them done.
So let's say hypothetically, we are complaint-driven. What is the process that we have in place now, or maybe a future process that we could use to enforce or investigate the complaint? So, for example, if somebody has, 50 dogs and they're, and they have a junkyard and, they got a, who knows, right? There's all kinds of crazy things going on in the county. But what does that look like? So I tell Sean, hey, Sean, check out this email I got from a neighbor that's complaining. What's that process and what was the steps to act on that? Do we even have that in place?
Yeah, I would say if you give us a little discretion, we'll give you answers like that. So what I would suggest is if we're complaint-driven, that we have a simple form for people to fill out, much like we do with open records. If someone wants an open record, we have a very simple form. All of it goes to the primary records custodian, which is the county manager. It can then be funneled out to the different elected offices, as the case may be. And we have a request. It's in writing. We know when we got it. We know who it's from. Basic information. I would suggest we create a very simple form that's similar in kind for zoning. So if there is believed to be a zoning violation and someone says, hey, I want to complain, we should be able to give them electronically or physically that form that would then start the process. And so long as they can fill that out in a way that's meaningful so staff can interpret it, we can take it from there. But is that what the board wants? Do you want to be complaint-driven? If so, we can come up with a simple process to implement that.
But currently, we don't have the form, we don't have a form.
It would take 5 minutes.
Yeah. Sean, did you?
Well, I think that's a great idea initially, but there's bigger questions with this, and quite frankly, we could have a work study session that just focuses on compliance. Enforcement would be more important to get an answer on from the board than whether or not there's a way for the public to complain, because the public can contact us and has contacted us on many issues. And having a compliance officer in that department who's out there actively responding to these questions and concerns, these things are already happening. The big issue has always been enforcement. And we can't even have a conversation like this, quite frankly, without including the sheriff's office. I mean, if we're going to have this conversation and talk about compliance, we really need the sheriff's office here to also weigh in and give us their opinions on how they can assist us with enforcement. So I really think this is a little early to talk about. We do have a meeting coming up where we're going to talk about those hot topics in the county, those dumping issues, those concerns. I think right now the board needs to look at our compliance policies as they are and let us know if that is what you want us doing. It's like any other policy we have in place from the prior board. We really need you all, because the board is different, start looking at the ones that are important to you and telling us, is this policy what you want in place, or do you want to change it? So, I mean, that's my 2 cents. I think we really need to look at enforcement first.
So Macy, can you get us copies of these? Okay.
So,
And
real
there's-
quick,
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say real quick to add on what you said, Sean. I thought we had that conversation with the sheriff, and we talked about, I think it was DJ or somebody working together, and you guys had come up with some kind of plan or idea. Did that just kind of not go anywhere and just got dropped off, or where did we leave that? I thought we already had that discussion.
Well, I thought we did too, but we're talking about it again today. So apparently there seems to be confusion that we need to discuss internally and figure out what everybody's thinking about and if we're on the same page.
Well, I think the confusion comes from just what we've said here in the last few minutes is, you know, we're at a point where the tail's wagging the dog here, so we need to get our ducks in a row and get our policies and stuff so they can enforce it and not expose us to liability.
So it sounds like I need to circle back with Sean, and my apologies. So I will work with the county manager and Jennifer on our side of things. But if you could be thinking about some of the repercussions of your decision points and then looking at your policies, I think then we can come back together and have a better discussion. So
Okay.
my fault for being a little premature on this. I do think there's decisions to be made, but not necessarily today.
Understood. All right. Commissioner Schroeder?
Historically, the time that I've been in the county, there's been very few ordinances passed by the board, but there is a nuisance property, nuisance house ordinance out there, so that would be another thing that we need to look at and see if we need to update and see what's included with that.
At some point, I'll just say this, I'd like to get the county manager and Lance, you and, let's go out and take a look at a couple of places that we've been talking about at some point. And Jennifer, if you want to go, you're welcome.
And just for further clarification on compliance, we'd also need to include the health department as well in those discussions.
It's true. Yep.
Because all these different pieces have to be on the same page.
Right.
Sounds like we're probably going to have a great meeting coming up when we sit down and talk about the hot spots that are going on in the county right now. So, but again, we need direction from the board. What is the board's appetite on enforcement? It's always been a question of how much enforcement do you want on these things and what kind of enforcement? Is that the sheriff's office? Is that simply the health department? Or is that even having our county attorney send out letters and things of that nature? Different counties address this differently. We really need to hear from you all how you would like us to enforce these things moving forward. That way we're all on the same page and everybody understands what enforcement is going to look like and how much help can we get from the sheriff's office on it. Because they are very important in enforcement.
Yeah, to bring up the sheriff's office, they submitted a lot of requests for staffing. I didn't see a request for a compliance officer. So that could be something that we discuss as a substitute for one of their deputy requests, something like that. I mean, it's worth discussing. Maybe they're part-time compliance, part-time deputy patrol.
And what about DJ? Can he be double role? I guess he's got to be sworn in order to.
I think basically it comes down to how we write our policies, and then how much help we can get from law enforcement to get the enforcement piece started from beginning to end. Lance has been very helpful in reviewing those things, talking to the sheriff's office staff, talking to DJ. But again, it comes down to the county's appetite. This conversation has gone on since even, the entire time I've been here, I've had conversations with my board on compliance and how much enforcement you want. The biggest indicator on the fact that we are not enforcing these things enough is that position of code enforcement officer has changed many, many times because the people in those positions get frustrated because the county is not enforcing enough, in their opinion. So they leave. So what we really need to know is how much enforcement do you want to impose on those things for, these homes that are out of compliance before they become well out of compliance. We just need to know what the board's appetite is. And then staff can enforce the policies of the board.
I think we need to see the the policies and things, and then we can probably come back and answer that, but I'm always in favor of enforcement, so we've got to do something before this. I mean, there's some pretty bad issues that we need to address, so. Anyway.
I think start with health and safety.
Yeah.
Issues.
So could we set up a meeting, Macy, with the sheriff and the board and folks here today, and let's see if we can get some common ground here and start getting some enforcement done and see what we need to do? Okay. We need to probably do that, because as he said, this has been going on for a very long time. We need to put this thing together, and we need to stamp it and be done with it. So, are there any other comments, questions? You said that wasn't going to take very long, so come on now. Any other comments?
It always takes long when there's an attorney in the room. My
There
apologies.
you go, that's right. We appreciate you though, sir. All right, Jennifer?
No, sir, thank you. That's provided the direction I think we need for now.
All right. Sean, anything else, sir? Macy, you got everything you need? Commissioner Buck? Commissioner Schroeder? All right, we will adjourn. Thank you.